Hi, I'm Lori Rozakis, and welcome to Video-Aided Instructions Upgrade Your Writing series. This is the fourth program in the series, Crafting Sentences. First of all, what is a sentence? A sentence is a group of words that has a subject, a predicate, and expresses a complete thought. The subject will be a noun or a pronoun. The predicate is the verb or the verb phrase, and anything that is not part of the noun or the pronoun. Let's take a look at some examples to see what we're talking about. Here's a group of words that is lacking the subject. Was the oldest person elected president at age 69? That's not a sentence because we don't know who that oldest person was. Here's the corrected version. Ronald Reagan was the oldest person elected president at age 69. Well, now it's correct because now I have my subject. Here's an example of a word group that is lacking the predicate. John F. Kennedy being the youngest person elected president at age 43. Being is in the wrong form to be a complete verb. Here's the corrected version. John F. Kennedy was the youngest person elected president at age 43. And our last example is incomplete because it does not express a complete thought. Because Theodore Roosevelt was the youngest person to become president, he was 42 when he succeeded McKinley, who had been assassinated. Here's the corrected version. Theodore Roosevelt was the youngest person to become president. He was 42 when he succeeded McKinley, who had been assassinated. Now, as you can tell from these examples, you cannot use the length of the word group to decide whether the sentence is correct and complete, because you could have a very, very long word group that is still not considered a sentence because it's missing a subject or a verb or does not express a complete thought. So instead, you've got to use our three-part test. Does it have a subject? Does it have a predicate? And does it express a complete thought? So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and identify each sentence as correct or not. Explain why each incorrect sentence is incorrect. Then correct it. When you're finished, come back. Number 1, have been made throughout history and continue to be made today. Well, my question is, what have been made throughout history? What is continuing to be made today? So I'm missing my subject. I must provide a subject. Now let me see if I can think of something. Mathematical advances would make sense here. So now my sentence has a subject. Mathematical advances have been made throughout history and continue to be made today. Now my sentence is complete and it makes sense. Number 2, mathematics, wherever there are difficult problems that involve quantity, structure, space, or change. This sentence doesn't make sense either. And the reason is I'm missing a predicate. I need some verb in there to make sense. I'll try exists. Mathematics exists wherever there are difficult problems that involve quantity, structure, space, or change. Now my sentence makes sense. Number 3, most of the mathematical notation in use today not invented until at least the 16th century. Well, that doesn't make sense either. I'm obviously missing a part. I know I have my subject, most of the mathematical notation, so I must be missing my predicate, and indeed I am. I need some verb. I think I'll use a form of to be. I'll use was. Most of the mathematical notation in use today was not invented until at least the 16th century. Now my sentence is complete. Number 4, modern notation makes mathematics much easier for the professional, but beginners often find it daunting. This is correct as is. It, in my second clause, refers to modern notation, and therefore I have a compound sentence. Modern notation makes mathematics much easier for the professional. That's my first independent clause. Beginners often find it daunting. That's my second independent clause. I've joined those two independent clauses, those two complete sentences, with the conjunction but. Remember, but is a coordinating conjunction. It's one of the fanboys. Remember the fanboys? For, and, nor, F-A-N, but, or, yet, and so, boys. I'm using but here to show the contrast between the second independent clause and the first independent clause. Number 5, because mathematical language can be challenging for beginners. Well, that doesn't make sense. Because, so what happens as a result of that because? It's an incomplete thought. I'm going to delete the word because. And since my sentence is now starting with mathematical, I'm going to make that uppercase. Now it reads, mathematical language can be challenging for beginners. So I've turned a dependent clause, a clause that started with a subordinating or dependent conjunction because, into an independent clause, a complete sentence, by deleting that dependent conjunction because. Number 6, mathematicians want their theorems to follow from axioms and postulates by means of systematic reasoning. That is correct. I have my subject, mathematicians. I have my predicate. The rest of my sentence, they want their theorems to follow. So I have a complete thought and a subject and a verb. I'm correct there. Number 7, Carl Gauss, referring to mathematics as the queen of sciences. That is not correct because my predicate, the verb, is in the wrong form. My predicate, my verb, is the word referring. I have to put that into the form referred, ed, for it to be correct. Now the sentence reads, Carl Gauss referred to mathematics as the queen of sciences. And now it makes sense. Number 8, since the major disciplines within mathematics first arose out of the need to do calculations in commerce, to understand the relationships between numbers, to measure land, and to predict astronomical events. I made this one a little bit tricky. Sometimes we assume, incorrectly often, that if a sentence is very long, it must indeed be a sentence because it has so many words. You learned in this program that length is not the way by which you can judge whether a sentence is correct or not, because you can have a very short, complete sentence and a very long, incomplete group of words. This is not a complete sentence because it's not a complete thought. And the reason is that little word since. By starting with a dependent or subordinating conjunction, I have made this an incomplete thought. Since the major disciplines within mathematics first arose out of the need, blah, 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 doesn't make any sense. What does that mean? What is the result of that? So to correct that, I'm going to eliminate the word since. Now my sentence is indeed a sentence. It is indeed an independent clause because it makes sense. The major disciplines within mathematics first arose out of the need to do calculations in commerce, to understand the relationships between numbers, to measure land, and to predict astronomical events. This now makes sense. So to reiterate, do not be misled by the length of the word group. Whether it's short or long does not tell you whether it is an independent or a dependent clause. This is dependent even though it is very long. Instead, go by our rule. Does it have a subject? Does it have a predicate? And does it express a complete thought? Number 9, originates with geometry. This word group is missing a subject. I don't know what originates with geometry. It could be a ham sandwich for all I know that originates with geometry. So I've got to look at this word group and try to figure out which subject would make the most sense. I'm going to use the study of space because I happen to know that the study of space did indeed originate with geometry. Now my sentence is correct because I've added a subject. The study of space originates with geometry. Number 10. Although understanding and describing change is a common theme in the natural sciences, and calculus was developed as a powerful tool to investigate it. Again, very long, but not a complete sentence. The reason is it is not a complete thought. This is a dependent clause because of that word although. So it does not give me a complete thought. I have to eliminate the word although, and then I have an independent clause. Understanding and describing change is a common theme in the natural sciences, and calculus was developed as a powerful tool to investigate it. Now I have a very nice compound sentence, 2 independent clauses. Sentences are classified according to their function and their form. The function of a sentence is the purpose that it fulfills. The form of a sentence is the number and the type of clauses that it has. There are 2 types of clauses, dependent and independent, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. Now, sentence functions. There are 4 functions of sentences: declarative, interrogative, imperative, and exclamatory. A declarative sentence declares or states something. Those are sentences that state an idea and end with a period. Interrogative sentences interrogate or ask a question, so they end with a question mark. Imperative sentences give orders or directions, and they can end with a period or with an exclamation mark, depending on the sense. Exclamatory sentences exclaim, so they would end with an exclamation mark because they convey strong emotion. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and identify each sentence as declarative, interrogative, imperative, or exclamatory. When you're done, come back. Around 1750, the first glue patent was issued in Britain for a glue made from fish. This is a declarative sentence. It's a statement. Part of the way I can tell, as you know, is from the end punctuation. It doesn't have a question mark, and it doesn't have an exclamation mark. So I can knock out those 2 kinds of sentences. Number 2. Did you know that the concept of an aerosol originated as early as 1790? Question mark. Well, it did! Exclamation. When I see a question mark, I know I have an interrogative sentence. I'm asking a question. When I see an exclamation mark, I know that I have an exclamatory sentence because I'm exclaiming something. I'm saying something that has a bit of excitement to it. Number 3. Close the door. I'm giving a command. When I give commands, I'm using imperative sentences. Number 4, George Westinghouse invented air brakes in 1868. This is a statement, and since it's a statement, it is a declarative sentence. I'm declaring something. Number 5, the first mass-produced and widely used metal foil was made from tin. I've got that exclamation mark or exclamation point at the end of the sentence. That shows me that this is an exclamatory sentence. Number 6, Eli Olds invented the basic concept of the assembly line, and Henry Ford improved it. This is a statement. Therefore, it is a declarative sentence. Number 7, Ronald Riley invented the automated electrified monorail system. I put the exclamation mark there that made this an exclamatory sentence. If I had left that exclamation mark off, this would have been a declarative sentence. But I wanted to convey the excitement of the automated electrified monorail system, so I put that exclamation mark right there. Number 8, close your books for the test on inventors. I'm giving you a command. I'm telling you to do something. Commands, as you know, are imperative sentences. Number 9, when did D. Horton and Lou Hewitt invent the sliding automatic door? It was 1954. I've got 2 sentences there. The first sentence asks a question. My voice went up, but even without knowing that, when you read it on your own, you saw the question mark at the end of the sentence. That tells you it's an interrogative sentence. The second one is a statement. It has a period at the end, not a command. Therefore, you know it's a declarative sentence. Number 10, the bikini was invented in 1946 and named after the Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands, the site of the first atomic bomb testing. I have an exclamation mark at the end of that sentence, so I'm making this an exciting sentence. That shows me it's exclamatory. Clauses are groups of words that contain subjects and predicates. They may or may not express a complete thought. And earlier I spoke briefly about clauses, and I told you there were 2 kinds of clauses, independent and dependent. An independent clause is like an independent person. An independent person can stand alone, and so can an independent clause. And the reason is an independent clause has a subject and a predicate and expresses a complete thought. An independent clause is also called a sentence. Here's an example. Aaron Burr killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. A dependent clause has a subject and a predicate, but does not express a complete thought. Like a dependent person, it cannot stand by itself. It has to be attached to something else. A dependent clause is also called a subordinate clause, sub meaning under. Here's an example. Because Aaron Burr killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. Well, I still have my subject and my verb, but it is now not a complete thought because of the word because. It has now become a dependent or subordinate clause. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and label each clause as independent or dependent. When you're finished, come back. Now remember, you can't tell whether a clause is independent or dependent by its length. You have to look to see if there's a subject, a predicate, and the sentence or the word group expresses a complete thought. Let's look at number 1. Although in 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and 4 other women invited the public to the first Women's Rights Convention to discuss expanding the role of women in America. That's long, but that is not an independent clause. That is not a complete sentence. It is dependent because of the word although. When I see that subordinating or dependent conjunction, I know that that cannot be a complete sentence because I am subordinating that word group, that clause, to something else. So this is dependent. Number 2, at the end of the 2 days, 100 people made a public commitment to work together to improve women's quality of life. This is a complete thought. This has a subject, a verb, and expresses a complete idea. So this is an independent clause. Number 3, since more than 1,000 miles of trail ruts can still be seen today in the vast, undeveloped West, reminders of the greatest mass migration in U.S. history. Because of that word since, that subordinating or dependent conjunction, this is not a complete sentence. This is a dependent clause. Number 4, the road to California carried over 250,000 gold seekers and farmers during the 1840s. That's a complete sentence. It has a subject, it has a verb, and it expresses a complete thought. That's independent. Number 5, in central Colorado lies one of the richest and most diverse fossil deposits in the world. Also a complete sentence, therefore it's an independent clause. I just want to pause for a second and remind you, the reason why we're concentrating on this is because when you can write complete sentences, you're expressing your thoughts clearly and correctly, and your audience, your readers, will understand what it is you're talking about. Sometimes you're going to want to use dependent clauses, sometimes you're going to want to use independent clauses. You're going to want to combine them in the ways that best express your ideas. But it's very important that you're able to recognize which is which so that you can use them correctly. Number 6, a Stamp Act is a law enacted by a government that requires a tax to be paid on the transfer of certain documents, such as property deeds. Complete thought, has a subject, Stamp Act, has a verb, is, therefore it is an independent clause. Number 7, as those that pay the tax receive an official stamp on their documents. Doesn't express a complete thought because of the word as, my subordinating conjunction. Therefore, it is a dependent clause. Number 8, for the reason that a stamp duty was first introduced in Great Britain in 1694 following the Dutch model. The words for the reason that tell me this is a dependent clause. Without those words, I have an independent clause. A stamp duty was first introduced in Great Britain in 1694 following the Dutch model. So the first one with that phrase is dependent. Without it, it's independent. Number 9, because stamp duties are the oldest taxes still raised in Great Britain. And this is dependent because of the word because. One of the most common and most useful subordinating conjunctions. Remove the word because, and I have an independent clause. Now let's take a look at the different forms that a sentence can take. You can have a simple sentence, a compound sentence, a complex sentence, and a compound complex sentence. One type of sentence is not any better or any worse than any other type of sentence. So don't think that a simple sentence means it's simple-minded. That's not the case at all. Ernest Hemingway, for example, wrote mainly simple sentences, and his books were so highly regarded he won the Nobel Prize. You will use a variety of different types of sentences depending on your purpose and your audience. A simple sentence has one independent clause. Remember, that's one subject and one verb, although either or both can be compound. A simple sentence can have adjectives, can have adverbs, can have prepositional phrases. It cannot, however, have another independent clause or any subordinate clauses. Here are some examples. Americans eat more potatoes than any other vegetable. That's one independent clause. Now I'm going to give it a compound subject. That's two subjects. Turtles and crocodiles. Subject 1 is turtles, subject 2 is crocodiles. Are both types of reptiles. Still a simple sentence because I have only one independent clause. Now I'll try one subject and a compound verb. We, my subject, classify reptiles and construct a reptile habitat. Classify reptiles, one verb, construct a reptile habitat. Compound, I join them with and. Two or more independent clauses joined in one of two ways is a compound sentence. You can join it with a coordinating conjunction, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Or you can join it with a semicolon. Go back for a second to the coordinating conjunctions. You can remember these with the acronym FANBOYS. F-A-N-B-O-Y-S. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Those are the only coordinating conjunctions that we have. Or you can use a semicolon. Here's an example. Turtles are reptiles with a protective shell, comma, and there are over 250 species of turtles. I can tell this is a compound sentence because I have two independent clauses joined by one of the coordinating conjunctions. I chose a specific coordinating conjunction, and, to show equality between the two independent clauses. If I had chosen but or yet, I would be showing contrast. If I had chosen or, I would have been showing choice. If I had chosen the semicolon, I would have been showing that they are very closely linked indeed. So you're going to choose the coordinating conjunction or the semicolon that best expresses the meaning and the relationship between those independent clauses. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and combine each pair of simple sentences to make compound sentences. Use one of those fanboys, for and nor, but, or, yet, so, or a semicolon. Remember that the semicolon forms a stronger bond, a stronger link than any one of those coordinating conjunctions. And that's because by eliminating the conjunction, it is pushing the two independent clauses closer together. So use the semicolon only when those two independent clauses are very closely related. Choose the coordinating conjunction that best shows the meaning that you want to convey. For example, and shows an addition, but shows contrast, or nor show choice, and yet shows contrast. Then come back. Number 1, geometry now uses methods of calculus and abstract algebra. So, many modern branches of the field are not easily recognizable as the descendants of early geometry. I use the coordinating conjunction so to show result. To me, that was the most logical way to link those two independent clauses. Also, notice there's a comma right before the coordinating conjunction. That's the structure that you'll use. Number 2, Euclid's was not the first elementary geometry textbook, but the others fell into disuse and were lost. I used but there to show result. Here's the first thing. I've got now a change. This is what happened in the second thing. Number 3, one of the most famous rules in geometry is the Pythagorean theorem. People never forget it. I chose a semicolon there because that second independent clause, people never forget it, directly follows from the first. So I saw a very close relationship between those two clauses and decided I didn't want a coordinating conjunction between them. The semicolon would link them best by showing how closely they really are related to each other. Number 4, the mid-Atlantic ridge has examples of volcanoes caused by divergent plates pulling apart. Semicolon. The Pacific Ring of Fire has examples of volcanoes caused by convergent plates coming together. I really like that semicolon there because I like that contrast between apart in the first independent clause and together in the second independent clause. So I've got a really nice relationship between apart and together. And I thought by using the semicolon, I would link them. So now what I'm doing is I'm making stylistic choices based on the tools that I have at hand. In this instance, the tools are my coordinating conjunctions and my semicolon. You'll do the same thing. You'll pick exactly the word that you need that best links your ideas and shows the relationship between them. Number 5, in these places, the crust is very thin and eruptions occur frequently. Well, the and fits perfectly because it's showing that the eruptions follow directly from the thinness of the crust. Number 6, some volcanoes have rugged peaks formed by lava domes, but others are massive plateaus. Well, this one was really easy for me because that but indicates that I have a contrast. Some are rugged peaks, contrast, but others are massive plateaus. Complex sentences may sound difficult, but they're really quite easy. A complex sentence simply has one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. The dependent clause can go first or second, and you'll decide which method best suits your purpose and your audience. You link the dependent clause to the independent clause with a subordinating conjunction. And there are many of these, far more than just the fanboys, coordinating conjunctions. Here are a few examples. Because, when, while, unless, since, until, after, although, and as. And just with the coordinating conjunctions, you will choose the specific subordinating conjunction that expresses the exact shade of meaning that you need. Here's an example. Turtles that live on land tend to have thick shells, comma, while those that spend nearly all of their time in water usually have thinner shells. In this particular sentence, the independent clause is first. The dependent clause is second. I can tell that because my dependent clause starts with a subordinating conjunction. Were I to switch it, then I would create a slightly different meaning. Many writers like to put the dependent clause first, but that really is up to you, depending on your purpose and your audience. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and combine each pair of clauses to create complex sentences. Notice that I've given you the word that I would like you to use. So for example, in number 1, I'd like you to use the word when. In number 2, I'd like you to use the word because, and so on. When you finish this, come back. Now what's nice about this is you can do it in 2 different ways. You can put the dependent clause first in the sentence, or you can put the independent clause first. I've done it both ways to show you the difference between them. You will pick the way that best suits your purpose, your audience, and your personal style. Number 1, no one answered when she called. When she called, no one answered. In the first one, no one answered when she called, I put the independent clause first. No one answered, independent clause. Second one, I put the dependent clause first. When she called, comma, no one answered. There is a slight difference in meaning. The first one, I'm emphasizing that no one answered. In the second one, I'm emphasizing her calling. So you'll choose the one you like based on whether you want to emphasize one part of the sentence or another part of the sentence. So here, when I want to emphasize, for example, the fact that she did the calling, I would take the second one and put the dependent clause first. So when I read it, the first thing I see is her calling, when she called. So I'm giving that the emphasis. Number two, because the tectonic plates move, each volcano becomes dormant after a while. Each volcano becomes dormant after a while because the tectonic plates move. In the first one, I have the dependent clause first, which I can tell because it starts out with the dependent conjunction, because. In the second one, I have the independent clause first and the dependent clause second. Number three, although my uncle worked very hard, he never succeeded. My uncle worked very hard, although he never succeeded. Here I have the dependent one first, and I have the independent one followed. Second example, I start out with the independent, and then I have the dependent. Let's look at this a little bit more carefully. In the first one, although my uncle worked very hard, I am emphasizing that my uncle is a hard worker. In the second one, the one where I have the independent clause first, I've still got my uncle working very hard, but now what I've done is I've taken the although and shown result. Up to you to decide which one you think best expresses your ideas. Number four, since it allows hot molten rock to escape from deep below the surface, a volcano can radically alter the Earth's landscape. That's got my dependent clause first, as shown by the dependent conjunction since. Second example, a volcano can radically alter the Earth's landscape since it allows hot molten rock to escape from deep below the surface. Now I have my independent clause first and my dependent clause second. Number five, I did a little bit differently. While there are volcanoes scattered all around the world, most are clustered around the Ring of Fire. So I took this dependent clause, while there are volcanoes scattered all around the world. Then I tried something a little bit different. While most are clustered around the Ring of Fire, there are volcanoes scattered all around the world. So what I did here is I took the other part, most are clustered around the Ring of Fire, and made that my dependent clause. So in the first example, I'm emphasizing they're clustered around the Ring of Fire. In my second example, I'm emphasizing that volcanoes are scattered all around the world. But in both examples, I'm starting out with the dependent clause with while. There's even a third way that I can do this particular sentence. I can start out with my independent clause instead of my dependent clause. In that case, it would read, there are volcanoes scattered all around the world, while most are clustered around the Ring of Fire. I didn't like that one at all. I thought it sounded a little bit not idiomatic. Idiomatic means that it has a commonplace use. It follows one of the idioms that we use. So it just didn't sound right to me. It sounded a little bit awkward, so I don't think I would use that at all. Very important example, because what this illustrates is while you can flip your clauses and you can move your subordinating or dependent conjunctions, you don't always want to, because it's not always going to sound right. It may sound awkward or unidiomatic. So just because you can move it doesn't mean you have to move it. Go for the one that not only is correct grammatically, but also sounds idiomatic or correct to your ear. Number 6, although volcanoes do play a role, there are many other factors that contribute to global warming. Starting with my dependent clause. Starting with my independent clause, there are many other factors that contribute to global warming, although volcanoes do play a role. And again, here I've got a subtle shade of meaning difference depending on which part of the sentence I put first. And that choice is yours, depending on what it is you wish to emphasize. The last kind of sentence is called a compound complex, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a compound sentence, 2 independent clauses, with some dependent clauses. That's the complex part. So you have at least 2 independent clauses and at least 1 dependent clause. As you would expect, these tend to be relatively long sentences. Here's an example. Although typical lizards have 4 legs ending in clawed toes, several types of lizards have reduced limbs, or they may not have any limbs at all. Now you may like that sentence and you may think that works very well, or you may decide to do a little bit of editing on it. So you may do it this way. Although typical lizards have 4 legs ending in clawed toes, leaving your dependent clause alone, several types of lizards have reduced limbs or not any limbs at all, or no limbs at all, depending on your choice, in which case you've taken that compound sentence and you've changed it. And you might like that. I personally like that very much because I find it less wordy, and I like my writing to be concise because I think that's easier for my readers. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and combine each group of clauses to create compound complex sentences. I've supplied you with the conjunctions that I would like you to use. For example, in number 1, I'd like you to use and because. So you're using a coordinating conjunction and a subordinating conjunction because. Then come back. Answers. Let's take a look at these. Number 1, the truck broke down and the family walked 10 miles to the nearest town because no one passed who could rescue them. The truck broke down is an independent clause. My next independent clause is the family walked 10 miles to the nearest town. So I've combined my 2 independent clauses with my coordinating conjunction and. That gives me my compound sentence. To make it a complex sentence, I need a dependent clause. I created that with a subordinating or dependent conjunction because. So my dependent clause I put last because no one passed who could rescue them. Again, I have an independent clause, and a dependent clause. That gives me my compound complex sentence. Number 2, my aunt planned to drive to work, but she couldn't until the snowplows cleared the roads. My aunt planned to drive to work is an independent clause. She couldn't is also an independent clause. It's short, but I have my subject and I have my verb. She couldn't, subject, verb. So I have 2 independent clauses joined by my coordinating conjunction, but, compound sentence. To make it compound complex, I need some subordination, and that I achieved with the dependent clause until the snowplows cleared the roads. Until is my subordinating dependent conjunction. Number 3, since Rick forgot to water the plants, they wilted. He had neglected to prune them as well. Here I'm starting off with my dependent clause. Since Rick forgot to water the plants. Since is my dependent subordinating conjunction. They wilted is my independent clause. They is my subject, wilted is my verb. He had neglected to prune them as well is also an independent clause. So now I have dependent, independent, independent. That gives me my compound, complex sentence. Number 4. Football is fun, but I prefer soccer because it is faster. Football is fun, independent clause. I prefer soccer, independent clause. Combine the two with the coordinating conjunction, but gives me my compound sentence. To make it compound complex, I need my dependent clause. I get that with because it is faster. So here I have independent, independent, dependent. Number 5. When it started to rain, the game was called off, so we went to a movie. When it started to rain is my dependent clause because of my dependent conjunction when. The game was called off is independent. We went to a movie is independent. So I've got dependent, my independent joined by the coordinating conjunction so. Number 6. Because the owner refuses to sell, the land bordering the highway will not be developed and the mall will have to be built elsewhere. Because the owner refuses to sell is a dependent clause. Starts out with the subordinating conjunction because. My 2 independent clauses are the land bordering the highway will not be developed. There's 1. The mall will have to be built elsewhere. That's 2. Join them with the coordinating conjunction and. So I have dependent, independent, independent. So now what is an effective sentence? Well, effective sentences have 4 main qualities. They are correct, free from errors. They are clear, as I mentioned earlier. They are concise, as I said, concise meaning they are to the point. And they are varied, which means you would use some simple, some compound, some complex, and perhaps a few compound, complex as well. Let's start with correct. You know that your sentences have to be correct to communicate your meaning clearly. Correct sentences don't have any mistakes in form, punctuation, capitalization, or modifier placement. Let's start with form. Correct sentences are complete. They do not have any parts missing. A part missing creates a fragment. A fragment may be missing your subject or your verb, or may not express a complete thought. The sentences that we looked at earlier about presidents were fragments because they were missing parts, subjects, verbs, or complete thoughts. A run-on is when you take 2 independent clauses, 2 complete sentences, and you run them together without adding one of the coordinating conjunctions, fanboys, or without adding a semicolon. A comma splice is a run-on that uses a comma instead of a semicolon. So fragments, run-ons, and comma splices are examples of sentence errors. However, you are allowed to use fragments when you write dialogue in your narratives, because people very often speak in fragments, and so you want to capture that. That'll be obvious in your writing because you'll set off your fragments with quotation marks. Other than that, however, you would want to avoid using fragments in your writing. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and complete each of these sentences in your study guide. Then come back. Here are some possible answers. The good news is that animals help reduce blood pressure and signs of stress. What I've done there is I have corrected the fragment. The second one is also a fragment. Here's my correction. Parents who allow their children to have pets know that children can become more loving and responsible as a result. Number 3 is a run-on. Here's my correction. A diamond is cut with special grinding wheels, and diamond dust is used as an abrasive. Your answers might be a little bit different from mine, but as long as your sentences are correct and complete, it's fine. So now what I would like you to do is pause the program and identify and correct each sentence error. Then come back. Number 1, flowers that are freshly cut. Well, that makes no sense. What about flowers that are freshly cut? So I've got to add something to make that a complete thought. I could say flowers that are freshly cut do not last long, or flowers that are freshly cut smell so nice in the house, or flowers that are freshly cut make me sneeze. As long as I've got the rest of that sentence, I'm okay. So I've taken my fragment, I've taken my dependent clause, and made it into an independent clause. Number 2, bees and wasps enable crops to grow. Caterpillars and beetles can devour these crops. Well, this is obviously a run-on because I've got 2 independent clauses that are run together, that are pushed together without the correct punctuation. Remember, to correct a run-on, you use one of the fanboys, one of the coordinating conjunctions, or you use a semicolon. That's the easiest fix. You can also correct a run-on by making it into 2 independent clauses, put a period between them. You can also correct a run-on by making one of those clauses, one of those independent clauses, into a dependent clause, and then creating a complex sentence. I'm going to try it a few different ways. I'm going to say, let's do it with a coordinating conjunction. Bees and wasps enable crops to grow, comma, but caterpillars and beetles can devour these crops. I like the but. I like the contrast. To me, it makes a lot of sense. I could have put a period there, but that would have made a rather choppy sentence, and it wouldn't have had as much logic to it. I could also put a semicolon there if I had wanted to, but I like it with the but because I like to show result. The second part of the sentence now explains the first part of the sentence. Number 3, the jar on top of the refrigerator. Well, what about the jar on top of the refrigerator? I'm missing something that happens to that jar. I have my subject, the jar, but I have no predicate. So I've got to add a predicate to take this fragment and make it into an independent clause, a complete sentence. The jar on top of the refrigerator is likely to fall off. I'll use my verb is, and I'll complete my thought. Now it's an independent clause. Next one, number 4. Insects are the most varied creatures on Earth. They share certain common features. Well, that's a run-on because I have 2 independent clauses pushed together. The first one is insects are the most varied creatures on Earth. The second one is they share certain common features. I've already tried some different variations. I'm going to try something a little bit different here. I'm going to make it into a complex sentence. I'll start with a dependent clause. Even though insects are the most varied creatures on Earth, they share certain common features. I like that a lot because now the even though they're varied makes a lot of sense when I combine it with the common features. So I chose that not only because it was a little bit different, I wanted to illustrate a point, but also because it makes the most logical sense considering what it is I want to convey. Next one. While we were at the lake swimming, well, what happened while we were at the lake swimming? I don't know. I have only a dependent clause. I have the word while, my dependent conjunction, so it doesn't make any sense. I've got to add the rest of the sentence. While we were at the lake swimming, our friends decided to go to the movies. Well, now it makes sense because we are here, they're there, and I've made a complete thought. Number 6, adult insects have 3 pairs of legs. Most have 2 pairs of wings. I have 2 independent clauses there. Adult insects have 3 pairs of legs, that's my first one. Most have 2 pairs of wings is my second one. So I've run together 2 independent clauses. I have a run-on. I want to combine them. Logically, I think I'll use the and because it would make the most sense. Adult insects have 3 pairs of legs and most have 2 pairs of wings. That makes sense to me because the 2 parts now fit together in a logical way. I could also have used a semicolon because a semicolon would have worked well there to show the coordination. To my ear, the and sounds better. Number 7, seeing my friend at the concert. Makes no sense, not a complete thought. What about seeing my friend at the concert? I have to add the rest of that. So I'm going to add, seeing my friend at the concert was a pleasant surprise. Now I have my subject and I have my predicate. Was is my verb. Number 8, there are many similar and related organisms. None have all the same traits that insects share. Well, this is a run-on because I have 2 independent clauses, 2 complete sentences, smushed together. I think I'll take that first one and I'll make that a dependent clause. Although there are many similar and related organisms, none have all the same traits that insects share. This makes sense to me because I'm showing now the relationship between the 2 parts of the sentence. Number 9, broke all the speed records in the last race. Well, who broke all the speed records? I'm missing my subject there. I need somebody's name, or I need some noun to make that complete. I think I'll use Janice. Janice broke all the speed records in the last race. Notice that I took that capital B and I made it a lowercase b because, of course, I added the subject before it. Number 10, roosters begin to crow at dawn. They seem to bring a farm to life. Roosters begin to crow at dawn is my first independent clause. They seem to bring a farm to life is my second independent clause. They are run together, so I have a run-on. I'm going to put a semicolon there because the 2 of them are very closely related. So the semicolon to me makes the most logical sense. Next, you have to use correct punctuation and capitalization. Every sentence has to begin with a capital letter and end with the correct end punctuation. The end punctuation can be a period, a question mark, or an exclamation mark, depending on the type of sentence that you are writing. You don't get to use more than 1 mark. In other words, you wouldn't have a period and a question mark together, or you wouldn't have 2 exclamation marks together. If you're using quotation marks, the periods always go inside. The question marks and the exclamation marks can go inside or outside, depending on whether they are part of the quote or not. So that's a matter of logic that you'll evaluate for each individual sentence. I also mentioned to you earlier that correct sentences have modifiers placed properly. Modifiers are describing words and phrases. To modify means to change, and you're modifying by describing something. You decide where to place your modifiers depending on the word that you wish to emphasize, but always place your modifiers as close as possible to the words that they describe, because that way you will avoid any kind of confusion. Here's an example. In these 3 sentences, the modifier is the word vigorously. It's an adverb. The chef beat the dough vigorously. The The chef vigorously beat the dough. Vigorously, the chef beat the dough. In that case, any of those placements is correct because it makes logical sense. But if I have a sentence where it doesn't make logical sense, I get a mistake we call a misplaced modifier. It's placed incorrectly. Misplaced modifiers describe the wrong word. They're exactly what the term suggests. So for example, here's one that has several possible mistakes. The player hit a home run with the green hat. This could mean that the home run was wearing a green hat, or it could mean that the player used a green hat to hit the home run. In either case, it's not correct. What we mean to say is the player himself or herself was wearing the green hat and then hit a home run. So we're going to move that modifier to the correct place by the word player. Now the sentence reads, the player with the green hat hit a home run. Now I have no ambiguity and the sentence is correct. Here's another example. I've taken the modifier only, and by putting it in different places, I've created different meanings. That's okay, except I don't know which meaning the writer wants. Here's one. He ate only the box of cookies. Well, this could mean that he didn't eat any cake, or he didn't eat any apples. Only he ate the box of cookies. Well, this could mean that she didn't eat any cookies. He only ate the box of cookies could mean that he didn't bake them, that he did something else with them. So I'm not really sure what the writer means. I've got to have that sentence clarified by moving that modifier so I understand exactly what is intended. Dangling modifiers appear to modify nothing because there's a word missing from the sentence. Now with misplaced modifiers, you're simply moving a word or a phrase. But with dangling, you've got to provide the part that's missing. For example, walking across the beach, the sand burned my feet. I'm missing something. I don't know who was doing the walking. There's no subject there. I have to add the subject. While I was walking across the beach, the sand burned my feet. These get confusing because you see my or my feet, you see something at the second part of the sentence and you think that it's clear, but it's really not. Here's a list of frequently misplaced modifiers. Almost, hardly, nearly, even, just, only, simply, exactly, merely, and scarcely. But as you learned earlier, any describing word and phrase can be misplaced. So read your sentences over carefully to make sure that you've placed all your modifiers in the correct positions. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and try this yourself. Then come back. Correct each sentence. The first two sentences are misplaced modifiers. She served hamburgers to the children on paper plates. That implies that the children are on the paper plates. The correction is, she served hamburgers on paper plates to the children. Number two, on July 20th, 1969, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, watched by nearly a fifth of the world's population. Well, as that reads, the world was watching the moon, not the astronauts. The correction is, watched by nearly a fifth of the world's population, on July 20th, 1969, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. 3 and 4 are dangling modifiers. They're missing the subject there. While I was walking to school in the cold, my ears froze. When people purchase a cell phone, the wide variety of calling plans and features overwhelms many of them. In this one, people purchase cell phones, not the calling plans and the features. You want to make your sentences concise by eliminating unnecessary words and phrases. We call unnecessary words and phrases redundancy. You want only the necessary details and examples that you need. Here's some examples. Honest truth most unique, proceed ahead, and small in size. Honest truth is redundant because truth is honest, so you only need the word truth. Most unique is redundant because things that are unique are the most of their category, so you would simply say unique. Proceed ahead is redundant because you cannot proceed in any other direction but ahead. You can't proceed back. So in that case, you would use the word proceed. And small in size is redundant because you wouldn't have anything that's small in color or small in smell, so you simply say small. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and try this yourself. Then come back. Please correct these redundant phrases. Here's the way I fix them. Few in number. Well, I don't need in number, I just need few. Combined together, combined means put together, so I would cross out together. 8 a.m. in the morning, a.m. means in the morning, so I would just say 8 a.m. Final end, well, the end is final, so I would say one or the other, depending on the meaning I needed. Complete stop, well, you can't have a partial stop because then you're still moving, so I would just say stop. Revert back, you can't revert any other way but back, so I would just say revert. Foreign imports, all imports are foreign, so I would just simply say imports. Sum total, either one of those words, but not both. End results, well, the results are the end, so I would just say results. Kills bugs dead, you wouldn't kill bugs alive, so I would just say kills bugs. Free gifts, one of my favorites. All gifts are free, because if they're not free, they're not gifts, so I would just say gifts. And live and breathe. Well, if you're living, you are breathing, so I would just say live. You also want your sentences to be clear, because this helps you communicate your meaning to your audience. One of the effective ways to make your sentences clear is to eliminate the initial to be, if you wrote that. For example, if you had it is, or there are, or there is, or there was, you would eliminate that to make your sentence more clear. These are called expletive constructions. Very wordy. It was Friday that we had the test. Why not simply say, we had the test on Friday? Or, on Friday, we had the test. I've gotten rid of that it was, and I don't need it. That makes my sentence much tighter, more concise by getting rid of unnecessary words. You can also make your sentences more concise and create logic by coordinating ideas. When you coordinate, you equate ideas, which means that the two ideas on either side of the conjunction are equally important. You would do this with short, choppy sentences because you're creating logic by doing so. You use the coordinating conjunctions from fanboys, for and nor, but, or, yet, so, or a semicolon. Here's an example. High-level clouds are typically thin and white in appearance. They can appear in a magnificent array of colors at sunset. Well, that's okay, but they're basically two short, choppy sentences. I can make that a little bit better. I could upgrade my writing by combining them through coordination. High-level clouds are typically thin and white in appearance, comma, but can appear in a magnificent array of colors at sunset. Now, working with what we said before about eliminating redundancy, if they're white in appearance, I don't need that phrase in appearance because that's the only way that they would be. So I would take this one step further and I would say high-level clouds are typically thin and white, but can appear in a magnificent array of colors at sunset. So now I've created logic through coordination and I have eliminated redundancy. So now what I would like you to do is pause the program and try this yourself. Combine these sentences through coordination. Then come back. Here's how I did it. Your answers may vary from mine, but go with logic and always make sure that you pick the conjunction that expresses the idea that you want. Number 1, cells are made up of molecules, and molecules are made up of atoms. In this case, I use the conjunction "and" to show equal ideas on both sides. A nucleus is the cell's control center. The cell membrane is composed of a double layer of fatty materials called lipids. Here, I used a semicolon to show an even closer relationship between ideas. Number 3, cells are made up of trillions of atoms, yet cells are not just tiny bricks. Here, I used "yet" to show contrast. 4, at first scientists couldn't see much within a cell, so they thought cells were just filled with a jelly-like substance. I used the coordinating conjunction "so" to show result. Number 5, slime molds are too small to be seen individually, but colonies of slime molds can be seen without a microscope. Here I used "but" to show result or contrast. You can also write very concise and effective sentences by using subordination. Remember, subordination makes one clause more important than the other one. You have your main clause and you have your dependent or your subordinate clause. Subordination helps you tighten your sentences, creating logic and a better style. And you're going to use one of those subordinating conjunctions such as while, after, although, as, when, where, unless, since, or because. And again, there are many of these. These are just a few. You're going to pick the one that best helps you convey your meaning. If you place the subordinate clause first, you separate it from the main clause with a comma. Here are some examples. Not subordinated. The turmoil of the French Revolution lasted 10 years, period. Napoleon Bonaparte became the dictator. I don't have any logic there. I've not related my ideas. This is much better. The turmoil of the French Revolution lasted 10 years until Napoleon Bonaparte became the dictator. Now I've put the independent clause first and the subordinate clause second, and I've linked them with the word until to create logic. Here's another example. Dogs generally have good vision. They see only various shades of gray. To subordinate, although dogs generally have good vision, they see only various shades of gray. Here I've taken the subordinate clause and I've put it first in the word although. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and try this yourself. Combine these sentences through subordination, then come back. Here are my answers. Compare them to yours. Because it has a brilliant crimson nose and bright blue cheeks, the mandrill is often called the most colorful mammal in the world. Number 2, when the American Revolution ended in 1783, the United States was at a crossroads. Number 1 and number 2, I put the subordinate conjunctions and the subordinate clauses first. In 3 and 4, I put them second. Coal became popular in the 1600s after England had burned up most of its wood to make products such as glass, bricks, and soap. 4, Charles Ludwig Dodson took the pen name Lewis Carroll after he wrote Alice in Wonderland. I did it this way because to me it made the most logical sense to link my ideas. One of the most effective ways to upgrade your writing is to use embedding. And when you embed, you take a part of the sentence and you put it in the main sentence. You literally place it in. That's what embed means. One of the best ways to embed is by using an appositive. An appositive is a group of words that renames the noun. Here's an example. Eudora Welty is a major Southern writer. She was born in Mississippi in 1909. Eudora Welty is the noun. Eudora Welty, comma, a major Southern writer, comma, was born in Mississippi in 1909. My appositive there is a major Southern writer. It renames Eudora Welty. I've set that off with commas to show that I can take it out of the sentence and it will still make grammatical sense. I can also embed by using who, whose, or which. Eudora Welty is a major Southern writer. She was born in Mississippi in 1909, my same example. Now I'm going to embed by using who. Eudora Welty is a major Southern writer who was born in Mississippi in 1909. Which one do you use? You pick the version that best suits your style, your purpose, and your audience. Try to get a variety, though, because it makes your writing more interesting. So now what I would like you to do is to try this yourself. Pause the program and rewrite each sentence by embedding phrases and clauses. Then come back. Here's how I did it. Compare my answers to yours. William Taft, comma, the first president to open a baseball season, comma, threw out the first ball in a 1910 game between Washington and Philadelphia. I used an appositive to rename Taft. Number 2, the U.S. Senate, which conducted an investigation that cost $2,000, was infuriated with Dolly Madison's purchase of a $40 mirror for the White House. There I've used which, also with an appositive. In 3, Abigail Fillmore, born in 1798, refused to move into the White House until it had indoor plumbing. All of those are much better sentences because I've created logic by combining sentence parts. You can also write concise sentences by using the active voice. The active voice is much less wordy than the passive voice. The passive voice is a construction whereby the subject receives the action. Our knowledge about the geometry of triangles was enriched by Pythagoras. In the active voice, I take my subject, Pythagoras, and I place it first. Pythagoras enriched our knowledge about the geometry of triangles. It's a much better sentence because it's more direct and to the point. You're going to want to use active voice as often as you can because it makes your writing powerful, vigorous, and clear. There's only one instance when you're going to want to use the passive voice, and that's when you want to avoid assigning blame in writing. So rather than using the active voice and saying, you made a mistake, you would say, a mistake was made by you. But to make that even nicer, you would take off the by you, and you would just say, a mistake was made. And then what you've done is you've spared somebody's feelings, but you've still conveyed your point. So now what I would like you to do is pause the program and try this yourself. Rewrite these sentences into the active voice. Then come back. Here's how I did it. The calf of a blue whale gains approximately 200 pounds each day. My subject, the calf of a blue whale, is first. Number 2, a goldfish in captivity has reached the age of 80 years. My subject, a goldfish, is first. And number 3, cats eat 1/3 of the total amount of canned fish in the U.S. My subject, cats, is first. An extremely effective way of writing concise sentences is by using parallel structure. Parallel structure means that every part of your sentence is in a matching grammatical form. For example, the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives, the adverbs, the prepositional phrases, and the clauses all match. Parallel structure is very effective because it creates rhythm in your prose. All prose, as well as all poetry, has to have rhythm. It makes your writing sound smooth. For example, I came, I saw, I conquered. It's parallel. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That's parallel. Parallelism is used a great deal in speeches to make the writing memorable and smooth. Here's some faulty parallelism. To avoid getting hit by lightning, do not seek protection under a tree, To try to avoid lying down on wet ground and staying on a bike. Here's parallel. To avoid getting hit by lightning, do not seek protection under a tree, avoid lying down on wet ground, and get off a bike. Here's another version. To avoid getting hit by lightning, do not seek protection under a tree, lie down on wet ground, or stay on a bike. As you can see, there are many different ways to create parallelism because you're going to pick one grammatical form or structure and match everything else to it. It might be single words. I went swimming, picnicking, and boating. You're matching all the single words. It might be phrases. It might be clauses. However you do it, though, they're all going to match to be parallel. So now what I would like you to do is pause the program and try this yourself. Rewrite these sentences by correcting the errors in parallelism. Then come back. The Industrial Revolution created the need for mill supervisors, lawyers, teachers, and people who operated telegraphs. Well, that's not parallel because the last part is not parallel. So you'll change that. The Industrial Revolution created the need for mill supervisors, lawyers, teachers, and telegraph operators. The second one is in parallel. During the Crimean War, Florence Nightingale cleaned up the hospitals, improved care, and was reducing the death rate to 2%. I'm okay on the first two parts, cleaned up the hospitals and improved care. My problem is with the third and last part, and here's how I'd fix it to make it parallel. During the Crimean War, Florence Nightingale cleaned up the hospitals, improved care, and reduced the death rate to 2%. So now, cleaned, improved, and reduced, all parallel. Going to my third example, can smarter machines and machines that are faster help us live long, more pleasant lives? And here's how I'd fix it to make it parallel. Can smarter, faster machines help us live longer, more pleasant lives? So now, smarter, faster, longer, more pleasant, all parallel. As I said earlier in this program, you want to suit your sentence style and length to your audience. You're going to try to use a combination of simple, compound, complex, and compound complex sentences because that creates a very interesting and varied style. However, you're always going to write simply and directly to make sure that you communicate. Remember, your purpose is always to communicate, whether you're entertaining, whether you're informing, or whether you are persuading. To sum up, a sentence is a group of words that has a subject, a predicate, and expresses a complete thought. Remember that your subject is your noun or your pronoun. Your predicate is your verb or your verb phrase. And to express a complete thought means you're making sense. Sentences come in four forms: declarative, interrogative, imperative, and exclamatory. Remember that declarative sentences declare or state an idea. They end with a period. Interrogative sentences ask a question. They end with a question mark. Imperative sentences give an order or a direction and end with a period or an exclamation mark. And exclamatory sentences exclaim. They convey strong emotion and they end with an exclamation mark. Sentences can be classified according to the clauses they have, as we discussed. Simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences, compound complex. We classify them by the number and the type of clauses. Effective sentences are correct, clear, concise, and varied. Well, we've come to the end of the program. I hope that you have found this instruction helpful and that you've learned some things that you can use to take your written communication to the next level. Be sure to join us in the next program in Video-Aided Instructions Upgrade Your Writing series, Building Paragraphs, where you'll learn important strategies for improving your paragraphs. Thank you for watching.
If math problems leave you scratching your head, unsure of where to start and where to go, don't worry. Video-aided instruction can help even the most math-challenged students excel. Whether you're taking math in middle school, high school, or college, or simply brushing up on those forgotten skills, our comprehensive DVD review sets are the ultimate supplements to your textbook and classwork. We have programs for a whole range of skill levels, from basic math to algebra and trigonometry, from statistics to college-level calculus. Our intensive programs feature real teaching by real teachers. They're jam-packed with hours of hands-on problem solving and feature hundreds of practice questions, easy-to-follow explanations, and proven strategies. Visit us online at videoaidedinstruction.com for more information about our exciting programs that help take the mystery out of math.
If you find studying for the GED overwhelming because you don't have basic reading, writing, or math skills, then Video-Aided Instruction's Pre-GED series is exactly what you need. This series makes the fundamentals much easier to understand and master. You'll want to view pre-GED language arts reading, language arts writing, mathematics, science, and social studies. Our pre-GED series is a great first step toward GED success.
When you're serious about learning an academic subject or scoring high on a test, there's just one name to know: Video-Aided Instruction. We don't waste your time with goofy skits, corny jokes, or silly sing-alongs. We get right to the point. Real teaching by real teachers. Visit us online at videoaidedinstruction.com to learn more about our exciting line of educational programs. As we say here at Video-Aided Instruction, press play to learn.